Marketing in the home services industry has changed so much over the past few decades, and at an even more rapid pace these last few years, almost to a point it's impossible to keep up with what's trending. Have you ever felt like marketing in today's economy is like flushing money down the toilet? That's where we come in and help honest home services companies just like yours learn and understand some of the most effective marketing strategies today. Strategies used by some of the top home services companies around the world. My name is Javier Lozano Jr., and welcome to the Trust Tipping Point Marketing Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Trust Tipping Point Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Javier Lozano Jr., and I've got an amazing guest. I've already talked about her before in our first episode, and I'm so excited to have her. Her name is Lilly Darling. She is the CEO for AnchorWave. Hey, Lilly.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Javier. It's so awesome to be here.
I'm so excited. I mean, this is one of the interviews I've been looking forward to because I think you and I we love to geek out on marketing. And we can do some more now.
Do that quite often. It's one of my favorite topics. So excited about talking about some cool stuff today.
That's awesome. So Lilly, basically this podcast is new, and what I want everyone to kind of know is more about you, your background, kind of, what you've been doing. Let everybody know kind of like, how you've been helping other companies in either home services or just even in general in marketing, and just, explain everything from there.
Sure. Well, it all started over 40 years ago. Okay, maybe that's too far back than you want to go. But I do kind of like to just kind of give the introduction of my focus and my passion. It's always been around things related to marketing and things related to business. So I went to the University of Arizona after growing up in the very cold North Alaskan winters, and came down to get some sunshine and an education. So that was my transition to Arizona, to Tucson, and went to school for graphic design and for marketing. So it's always kind of been this duality for me in terms of focus. And I, for a long time, struggled and thought those were two competing kind of sides of the coin, but really they have provided me with so much opportunity and just an interesting relationship between the branding, the character of a company, the identity of a company, and then on the flip side of that, what are the actual tactics and strategies and things that connect with consumers and get them to buy, things that a company can do to create loyalty, and all those wonderful things that go along with business marketing. So it's been an awesome ride. I owned a branding and graphic design company, still do. And so that kind of carried me through the first decade after college and allowed me to really put my feet on the ground in terms of so many things. I also did a 4 or 5 year stint with a local agency, got to be in, television production and billboards and all those kind of things. But back in those days, and this is where I am going to probably just drop. It's not even that, not that old, but age references. It's just that this industry does change so much, so you can't help but say back in the day. But back in the day, the first thing that people would ask us for would be a business card or a logo, right? Those were always the first introductory elements. And to some degree, those still stay as one of the foundational kind of components, but that really started to shift about 12 years ago. It then became the very first question anyone would ask would be, how do you do websites? What can you do to get me online? And so the entire shift went from more of a tactile paper traditional approach to recognizing the power of the internet and recognizing that a lot of activity was taking place that could grow their businesses online. So at that point, I was not a programmer. But, again, the fact that, branding and all these things kind of came together with web gave me the opportunity to really look at it and say, this is where the industry is going. And so around that time, my washing machine broke down and I had to go searching for a quick washing machine on Craigslist and came across this job description. They were not necessarily next to one another, but I must have gone a little bit off track and found the opportunity at AnchorWave and said, you know what, this is really kind of coming together in terms of what I've been noticing, what people are really asking for, and I took it as a sign. Yeah. So who knows about this company? They could have been great. They could have been not great. Turns out they turned out to be really great. I got a washing machine and I got an interview and began my journey with Anchorwave as initially a project coordinator facilitating clients in developing their websites.
Nice.
So that's how I came on board with Anchorwave.
I never knew that. I mean, that's actually a kind of cool story how it all kind of happened. But I also agree with you where there's not a lot of people like you where you have a design eye and then you understand the marketing piece. Because I'm not saying they're separate, but it's hard for a lot of people to see. Like some people can say like, "Oh, that looks pretty," but to actually be able to design it and understand what people are trying to convey,
Sure.
versus like the marketing side of like, this is how we're going to promote it. This is the copy we're going to use. It's almost like two sides of the brain. And what you have is it's a skill set that it's rare in my opinion.
Well, and I think that is going to tie into a lot of our focus of where we're headed this year as well, in
Hmm.
terms of we can't just rely on one side. Yes, it needs to look good, it needs to catch someone's eye. There's very big reasons that it needs to do that because there's just so many messages coming at us as consumers. You have to stand out, it has to represent quality. But on the flip side, you can't just be pretty. You got to say smart stuff. You have to understand your customer base. You have to be
Yep.
saying the things at the right time in the right order to grow that relationship. And that's really what marketing does. Um, so as you know, I moved forward with the web design team. I became the director, and then the vice president. And just recently, in the last couple months, has transitioned to the CEO position. And now it just feels like all of this stuff coming together at a really great time. So I'm super pumped to be able to now bring these things that we've been working on to the market, really
Yep.
take advantage of what's happening in the world also in a positive way.
Yep.
There's so much opportunity for businesses right now. And I think that's what gets me really pumped up is like anybody, listening, there's so much opportunity. I think that's one of the reasons we wanted to put together this podcast. Javier, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's
Oh,
so much information that's
100%.
powerful for businesses to use right now. Because even in some degrees, some of the things that have happened that have been maybe negative that have hurt related to pandemic and elsewise is really opening up some different doors. And so the best thing that we can do is just look at those opportunities and bring those to the forefront and help companies win. So
Yep.
that's what I'm excited about right now.
No, it's awesome. And I agree with you. I mean, the whole pandemic has definitely shifted how we conduct business. And it opened up a lot of opportunities for people that were willing to double down and willing to say, you know what, I'm not going to let this affect me. I'm not going to let this affect my business. I'm going to pivot and figure out a way to leverage this opportunity.
Right.
And every recession has an opportunity where a business can actually sit down and either sit on their hands and be like, can't do anything, or we're going to make some changes. I mean, I look at it like this, like this podcast is about the home services industry, but like last year the home services industry in a lot of segments exploded. I mean, you look at Lowe's or Home Depot, whatever, they were doing amazing because people were like, well, I'm bored at home, I've got to do a whole bunch of stuff. When was the last time you saw Scott's Lawn Service, like Scott's Seating or whatever, do a Super Bowl commercial? Like never.
Yeah.
And the reason is because everyone was buying a lot of their products to make their lawns look better, landscaping, all this other stuff. That never would have happened if it wasn't for this pandemic. I'm not saying it's good or bad for other people, but what I'm trying to get to is that there's opportunity there. We got to
Right.
find ways of leveraging it. And I think that's great that you brought that up. Um,
Well, and not
so
only just the industry, but just the way that consumers are thinking about things, they're making choices, the way that they're going about their research, the way that they're finding solutions for those things that they need and they're paying more attention
exactly.
to is now entirely different. So we have to, take another look at things and like you said, see where that opportunity is at because things have just shifted for consumers. So
Yeah, totally. And that kind of goes back to like, not goes back, but goes into our first speaking point that we're going to have here is, what is the trust tipping point? You and I sat here for, I don't know, a few weeks trying to figure out a name for this podcast. And we were
yeah,
throwing up all sorts of different names. And this one kind of just stuck, and it's been around in Anchorwave. So maybe tell a little bit of the history of the trust tipping point, how it kind of came about, and then what it is, and explain that so that people understand why this podcast is called that.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's important to convey what the most critical sort of thing that's happening in marketing. And even though on one hand, I think the word trust maybe has, I don't know, it might drum up pictures of like a bank or of a stuffy kind of business person, or they say, I trust us, or, put your trust in. It's like it could be conveyed as an older sort of term. But what is refreshed and new, and whenever you put that together with trust tipping point, there's a whole philosophy around it that's really new, really important. And I think we couldn't call it anything else, because no matter what angle we talk about marketing, no matter what kind of solution, if we're talking about SEO or we're talking about web, or we're talking about what's the best way to have an ad, all of it leads back to this trust tipping point. So I think it's critical to start at the most, critical point. We want to deliver the most value as possible right from the beginning. So that's kind of the reason why I think settling on a name that delivers the most value was key to both of us.
Yep, I
But
agree.
in terms of how it actually came to be, it's kind of like what we were just speaking about, the consumers that are in the whole in the world, and I'm one of them. It's not like just they are out there. We're all consumers of all kinds of things. The way that we think about things has shifted, and yet there's some similarities. So the human brain is really wired in fascinating ways, and me, this is one of my favorite topics to just talk about the psychology,
Yep.
what's really happening inside the brain. But when you pair that with what's going on with consumer behavior, you can really connect some insightful marketing dots. And so that's kind of where we go with the trust tipping point. So imagine this, that you're making a decision about buying anything. And we've got a couple examples that we walk folks through. If you're going to buy a $100 pair of cleats, or I don't know how much those were that you bought for your son, Javier, but there
They're
is
$20.
oh, they were only 20. Oh, well, great deal. Well, see, it happens for small ticket items, and it also happens for if you're going to invest in, buying Scots, for your lawn.
Yep.
We go through this process of making a decision, right? And that seems very basic. Of course, we have to decide. But what are the actions that we're doing these days when it comes to making a decision? And so if you look on one side of things, there's a certain amount of technology that is involved at our fingertips, right? Phone in our hands. That is huge over the last 10 years, and we know this. We know the impact of having phones in our hands has
Yep.
shifted the game. But when we make a decision and we pair that up with that technology, then what are the things that people are doing with that phone in their hand when they're making a decision? Right, they're asking mama Google, they're going there, they're seeing what's available in that search result. That's one thing, is
Yep.
what is even an option in that search result. Then the second tier is, oh, now I see these little stars next to that. What are people rated? What's this company rated? What's this product rated?
Yep.
How far do I have to scroll to get to those stars, or look at how many stars they don't have? So that's another piece that they're checking out. Then you might find something that looks like it's the right product that you're looking for, and you click on it. What kind of sense or emotion or feeling do you get from what they're representing there? So there's all these steps along the way. And so the technology plays a role. So if you just think about that, all those 3 or 4 different decisions or spots that I went along in that decision-making process that have to be kind of looked at and be present and be kind of checked off.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side of that, what I'm really doing is I'm just looking for evidence. I become like this lawyer, looking for clues and looking for evidence, because deep inside my psychological brain, I have this this fight or flight, and I'm not going to go into all the science around it, but
Yeah.
your amygdala, and what we know about that is really that old part of your brain that wants to do well and doesn't want to be excluded from the herd, or have that that survival kind of mechanism triggered. So I need to be certain about whatever decision I make, no
Yep.
matter if I'm deciding, hey, it's not the right time to buy these $20 pair of shoes,
Yep.
or hey, I'm getting enough evidence here that this is a good product and I feel good about buying it, and almost like I could defend myself to the herd. Like that's really what we're doing as consumers, is picking up enough clues to go forward, or we're picking up enough clues to say, I feel really strong about not buying these now. And so lots of times companies aren't really considering this entire journey that these little
Yes.
lawyer consumers are going on.
Yep.
And it's not necessarily that a lot of companies have bad stuff along each of those, steps of the journey. Sometimes they're just not paying attention to it, or there's nothing there at all. So when you can get a consumer to check all those boxes, gather enough clues, they get to the end of that route, and that's what we call the trust tipping point.
No,
The moment where they trust, right, you,
yeah.
and they've gathered enough clues, and so that trust is there, and that's the new way to think about trust. Like, that is powerful. That means there's been research, there's been energy, there's momentum. If you can get a consumer or your client to the trust tipping point where they trust you, then you can start to build a really dynamic relationship with them. That's whenever they're willing to fork over their dollars for you,
Yeah.
and that's when they're willing to spend their time with you. So it's critical in terms of every type of application, every type of program or service that we look at has to include those elements of the trust tipping point, because we recognize it's the backbone of it all.
No, that makes complete sense. And I love the way that you explained it, that it's a journey. And in that a lot of people have this whole misconception that it's like what we've said before in one of our webinars. It's like people think that you just run an ad, send them to some sort of website or storefront, and they buy. And that's
Right.
not really a buying journey. Like you
Only
explain all this.
4% of people do that. Like, that's, we
Yeah.
call those hot buyers. 4% out of a whole hundred. You could spend $100, you're only gonna get $4 back. No matter how you look at it, 4% of the people that you show the ad to are gonna be the hot ones that are ready to make. Oh, they're either impulse buyers
Yeah.
or they have you just happen to strike while the iron is hot. But 96%, still have this journey that they need to go on, and you got to pay attention to what they're going to do next, right? Otherwise you lose that 96% of your budget.
Yeah. And that's the other part that's, I'm glad you actually hit that is that, companies need to start looking at themselves as a guide. And you mentioned that kind of where you're helping your buyer through this journey.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies just, they almost kind of lean on their laurels, if you will. They're like, we've been around since 1974. Well, let's be honest, like no one cares that you've been around since 1974. I mean, that might have worked back in the 90s, where like longevity was an important thing. But today we're looking for saying like, and I'm not saying companies in the home services space are doing this, but there are some people that are, residential people that are getting shammed, by other home service type companies. And it's unfortunate because it gives a bad reputation to really good, trustworthy companies that have
Right.
worked hard to take care of their customers.
Yeah.
And
No,
so I think it's important.
that's a good point. Like, if maybe one of these things along that journey were left out by a reputable, company that is, maybe family owned, and they've been doing great work, and actually maybe they have so many happy customers, but they've never put that evidence, out there
Exactly.
for someone who's searching, then, they lose out. And I think that's really heartbreaking, because those are the companies that you want to stick around, because those
Yeah.
are the ones that do good work, and you want to like support them. So it is an unfortunate thing. I think that's one of the reasons why we wanted to bring this podcast forth, is to be able to say, hey, there's some opportunity for you to take all this great work that you're doing,
Yep.
your zone of genius, and put it in a place where you can really grow and strengthen your business.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense. I love that. Which kind of leads us down to this next, speaking point that we've got here is that why is the trust tipping point relevant? I mean, you've explained, this whole journey, what it is. We know why, we named this podcast this, and I love it. And the whole buying journey, it makes sense because that relates to me. It relates to you, and I'm not saying that you and I are the only buyers, but I think it relates to like 96% of everybody else. But why
Mhm.
is this trust tipping point relevant?
Well, I think, I did kind of talk about the fact that it is the backbone of this journey that folks are on. And so I think it becomes a kind of like a roadmap or a guide that really helps us feel confident about the decisions that we're making in our marketing plans. Because I think, this last year in particular has been hard for a lot of companies to feel just certain and confident that it's either time to
Yep.
invest in your marketing and to grow. And then once you feel like, yes, it's time and I'm ready to grow, then the how and which way,
Yep.
which tactic is the right tactic. And so I think kind of bringing it back to this model of looking at, where do you build trust? Where are the places that are really key for your consumers? That kind of gives you then the answer.
Yep.
And then you can really start to feel comfortable and confident about, hey, if I'm going to invest in growing my business, these are the right things to be doing. And it doesn't have to be a mystery. There really is some really steadfast, trustworthy, tried and true, proven, reliable results that can kind of predictably create impact for your company. So I think one of the other answers around that is just kind of going back to, I talked a little bit about how decisions are made. It's actually the decision making part of your brain is in that old brain, that amygdala, and there's only 6 kind of stimulus that speak to that old brain.
Okay.
And so what I really love about this is we can kind of proof test. You could almost take something that you're running as far as an ad right now, or
Okay.
take a look at your website, take a look at anything that you're doing in terms of marketing, and kind of run it through this filter and say, does this piece of material, or does this ad, or is this way that I'm talking to clients actually triggering the decision making part of their brain? Because then is it worth it or not? Otherwise, I'm not getting anybody any closer to the trust tipping point to buy from me. So
Yeah.
it gives you kind of this like way to eliminate maybe some of the other things that you thought, oh, I heard this on on the radio station, I thought it was a good idea. But if you kind of run it through this filter, then you can know with a whole lot more certainty that you're actually going to get results. So I'm just going to run through them really quickly. There's 6 of them, and I hope this will help some folks out there to kind of jot it down, or try to remember a couple of these, and just do kind of a self check on there and see how things are working for you. So one is that this old brain, this amygdala, is very self-centered, meaning it's really there to protect you, me.
Yep.
It's all me.
Yep.
So this is, and I say this one first because it's the top thing that companies do that really ends up being so blah and so unmemorable, is that they just say kind of a different version of what everyone else is saying. And they brag about only themselves. So like take a flooring company, for example, and they might say, we're the leader in the carpet, industry, and we have soft carpet. That is factual information. And I'm not joking, like those are definitely things we've seen.
Yeah.
But it's all about the company, and it doesn't speak then to their customer's brain that's saying, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? Now, if
Yep.
you can identify a pain point or a problem, wouldn't you love to wake up in the morning and wiggle your toes into the softest carpet and start your day just feeling cozy and warm? Completely different messaging, completely
Yep.
different way to frame that. And the benefit is all about me. It's all about,
Yep.
as I'm reading that, I'm like, okay, this speaks to that part of me. So that's like mega shift number 1. I'm not giving it the time or the
Yeah.
credit that, that it
No,
needs.
but you're saying certain things in there too. Is that you're using you and you're talking to your customer,
Right.
and that's huge because whenever we use the yous and yours, all of a sudden that customer is putting themselves in a situation. They're like, oh, this is me,
Right.
and so they're relating to that. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying.
And yeah, just if you don't have those parts, then you're not, again, this is all because we want to activate that part of the brain that makes the decision. So if we don't
Yep.
activate the part of the brain that makes the decision and get it to favor us, then it's not going to make a decision towards buying. So
Totally.
second one is contrast. And this is another one that I'll just use that same reference. If you're just saying you're the leader in the flooring industry, that's not new enough. That doesn't get anyone's attention enough. It doesn't, if you say contrast, like black and white, it doesn't stand out enough. It's very neutral.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that triggers me into being like, oh, hey, I'm going to pay attention to that statement because I've never heard it before, or
Yep.
it stands out from all the rest. And I think, we, especially nowadays, we are a little bit afraid, to maybe think, oh, I should have a personality as a business. I'm a business. I don't need a personality. Like
Yeah.
I'm, look at my sign. I'm a business. But I think what's really critical right now, especially after 2021, looking in 2020, we have to understand that businesses have personalities, and the way to stand out and create that contrast is by conveying that personality. You can do this visually through things that are, striking or catch the eye,
Yep.
but it's really important to disrupt from neutrality and not say the same thing, not play to the gray and play to the middle and try to be safe. So
Yeah.
just giving a permission slip to anybody out there
Eh,
who maybe thought, oh, I shouldn't, be saying things that
yeah.
have character. Do. It speaks to that brain, it speaks to that trust tipping point.
I mean, it's you have to have an opinion. I mean, it's just like Apple. I mean, it's a great example. Like, that one, Super Bowl ad they had where the lady throws a hammer
Right,
through the screen, and Apple has always stood a certain way, and that is, and people may not agree with it, but you know what? Everyone knows what Apple stands for.
right.
And so I agree with you. Like, the old Apple ads were like the PC versus a Mac. It's another,
Mhm.
both, comparison kind of thing. So yeah, I totally see what you're trying to say on that. Makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah, you do have to kind of position yourself to be really different than what else is out there,
Yep.
and that's what's going to gain attention. So the third one, that's that stimuli for that decision making brain, is tangible input, and this really means you have to anchor into something that's familiar. Like the brain wants to always doing shortcuts, right? Like shortcuts left and right, trying to process all this information that comes at us every day, right?
Yep.
So the one of the key things that you can do to kind of speak to that old brain is use either a metaphor or something that's familiar, so that you can, teach and also reference what you're trying to communicate in a way that has a shortcut in place in the brain already. So steer clear of all the techno babble and all your jargon. And if you do need to educate about a new term or new point, make sure that you're using metaphor or something familiar,
Yeah.
so that, oh, I get that. Oh, yes, that makes sense to me, or I've experienced that before. So you create like a connection
Yep.
in terms of that. So
Yeah. I
that's
mean,
the third point there.
I was going to say, like, I learned that concept. I mean, we're both Russell Brunson fans. We've both read Expert Secrets, and he refers it as the kind of like, um, and I agree with you. Like, it's one of those things that when you hear that, you're like, oh, now I understand. And for me, I learned this a lot when I was running my business, where I was teaching martial arts. I had to talk to kids, and how the heck do you teach kids that are 5,
Right,
6, 7, 8 year olds how
right.
to execute things that are supposed to be done for, athletic people? So you have
Hmm.
to almost come down to a whole new level
Right.
and relate to them differently. So I see what you're saying. It makes complete sense. I was doing it instinctively because it just made sense to me. And then when I learned more about it, I'm like, well, that makes sense now.
Yeah, and it's not even necessarily, it's not that the human brain can't comprehend or they're not intelligent, and even kids, they're intelligent human creatures most of the time. But there's just not enough time. You have a limited opportunity to convey information, and like I
Yeah.
said before, the brain is processing so many messages every
Yep.
single day. You have to make it understandable quickly,
Yeah. Makes
and
complete
so
sense.
you need to really do that. So
Nice.
the fourth piece is the beginning and the end. This I like to call story time. So
Yes.
the brain loves stories, and typically it kind of fuzzes out the middle, doesn't really remember the middle part so much. So if you go too long in the middle part of your story, really, if you start strong and then if you end strong, the brain makes a story out of that. And that's another way that you can kind of get people to remember and also to make a decision. So think about that as you're kind of checking your marketing. Are you creating a story? Does this make a little bit of sense? Or is it just random fact, being blurted out, or a random
Yep.
bullet?
Makes
Fifth
sense.
is visual stimuli. This kind of makes sense because the part of the brain where all your decisions are actually happening is right next to your optic nerve.
Okay.
So a lot of processing energy is happening right there. And so it goes along with contrast, as I mentioned, because if you can grab eyeballs and you can create something that's visually memorable or makes a
Mhm.
statement or tells a story, even better, it'll get stored and it will be stronger emotionally for the person who sees it. So this is why branding is still important, still good to have captivating images and to be able to tell those stories. But we're visual people for the most part. And so making sure that you're paying attention to that when you're getting people to make decisions is a huge factor. And
Yep.
then the last but not certainly not least is emotion. And so you really dedicate a lot of resources in that old brain to emotion. And so a lot of people think decisions are made predominantly by logic, right? Check the box, or you got this formula, you're going to collect all this data, and then out spits an answer. But the other side, I was given this metaphor. Speaking of metaphors, about decisions kind of being like a pair of scissors, and you've got the two sides of it that are really required. You've got the logic side, and
Yep.
then you've got the emotion side, and you can't make a decision or a cut um, in any other way other than using both of those sides. So you have to have that emotional kind of piece. And I think, we touched on a little bit with that self-centered, that me part, you evoking that emotion brings back that recall and also kind of helps to make decisions. So I, I hope that those 6 are helpful. I know it's a
Yeah.
lot of material to kind of take in. I think, brain is fascinating, but when you kind of connect all of these 6 things going on in a brain to decision making for consumers, and then applying that to marketing, it seems baseline, but it's like, it really is all powerful. If you can connect these to what you're doing, it'll grow your business and your bottom line and your ROI and all the great things that you're doing in terms of
Yep.
growth.
I mean, something to think about too is that, a business, any business, in the home services, especially obviously, but any business, like when you're doing this, you don't have to do all 6 of these things immediately. I think it's one of those where, okay, we're going to focus on the first one. We're going to talk about the customer's problems and relate to them and use the yous and yours and whatever, and really focus on that. And then you get that down, and then you move on to the next thing, and you move on to the next thing. I mean, it's just like if you're running a landscaping company, you're not going to most consumers are probably going to do their entire backyard all at once because it's going to cost them a fortune. They're going to do things in phases. Like, hey, we'll do this in phase 1. We'll do this in
Right.
phase 2. And it's the same thing. And that's kind of how I see this whole, second speaking point that you just brought up is those 6 steps. It's just phase it in.
Right. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so the next thing I want to kind of discuss a little bit more is kind of like, how does this impact and apply to the home services space? I mean, like these guys and girls are basically, they're consumed with what they do. Like all they want to do is landscaping. All they want to do is HVAC. Like they don't care about running a marketing campaign. They don't have time for that. Like,
Well, I think they probably care, but the time part is exactly right. I
yeah,
think everybody's got a zone of genius that they operate in, and for the most part, I think when you start a business and you're so passionate about it, or you really want to see it grow, and you really geek out on the equipment and the right staff, and you're making all these like critical decisions about the business itself. It oftentimes becomes secondary that you're thinking about, okay, how's new fresh leads come in, how do I get increased customer activity, and then it just becomes one of these, oh man, I realize how important this is, but I've got all these other like things that I really wanted to focus on and that I'm actually really good at. And I think that's the situation that a lot of companies find themselves in, is that they recognize the importance, but that time factor and needing to run a company that's thriving and producing quality results is also super high up there on their priority list.
yeah, makes complete sense. I mean, and that's, I think that's part of the thing. Like, it's hard to segment your focus on these 2 areas.
Right.
And that's where, I mean, do you want to spend time on just marketing
Mhm.
and doing the business side? Do you want to focus on why you started your business to help serve your customers?
Right.
Do you bring in a third party? Like, do you hire someone to do this? I mean, and then on top of that, like, where do you go?
Right.
Like, what direction do we want to go to? Is it all branding based? Is it all like what we're talking about, like building trust and through this whole journey? There's a lot of, places to kind of take this.
Right. Well, and I think lots of times people start businesses because they want to work for themselves, right? They want that freedom. And then all of a sudden you realize that you're getting caught up in so many things, and marketing can just add that extra weight that just feels like, oh my gosh, I have no freedom. Now, after I get the day done, I get the job done. Now I have to stay up all night thinking about how I'm going to grow it tomorrow. And that's one of the major things that we find we're able to change lives, really, because if we can create freedom or help you go home and just be with your family in the evening, and you're not stressing about how you're going to get work the next day, then then that can really open up a lot of that freedom for you, right? So you focus on your area of genius, and then able to trust the folks that are building trust with your customers. I think that's where the magic is. So I mean, you kind of asked, how this applies to companies and what they're trying to do, nowadays. And I think just kind of walking through, even that example that we gave earlier about how decisions are made. and, we're talking about consumers, being on their phone, being quarantined, looking at their walls, looking at their yards, looking at their design or pool or lack of,
Yep.
and thinking, maybe there's some stirring there, maybe there's some action. And so whenever they begin to do that research, it used to be that we would drive over,
Yeah.
to the strip mall or to the mall or to any kind of business center or downtown. And, we might pop in and meet someone and talk about, hey, I'm thinking about doing new window coverings, or, I'm thinking about a pool. And so that's really, quarantine, influenced, or just the fact that you've got all this information at your fingertips and you don't need to hop in your car. People go online, right? So I think it applies to all things online. And so that really is obviously a broad scope.
Yep.
Two areas that I would like say that this, I could bring an example to how we approach that online space and building that trust would be, number one, type in whatever it is that what you would say your keyword is, right? So let's say that it's air conditioning repair, and you type that in, and first of all, Google knows where you are when you're typing that in, right? So they know that I'm on the east side of town. And so what Google's going to do is give me the most relevant results, because that's what they always want to do. Google wants to say, who do I know that has great service and is close to Lilly, right? So Google's going to give me a set of results that are close to me and that are relevant. So that's really, if you ever hear anybody say algorithm, that's really what Google's doing. Close to me and relevant.
Mm-hmm.
So as a number one, whenever you're thinking about the trust tipping point and where you should be looking at influencing that, I would say it all kind of starts with search. And so then you say, what appears then as a result in search? And the number one change that Google's made recently, and this has been in the last 18 months, 2 years, is they have produced something called your Google My Business page.
Yep.
And it connects to the map. So that's why that is really important. So if you think about Google's trying to tell me results that are close to me, the map is really important, actually. Maybe you didn't think it was, maybe you don't even have a shop, but the location of your business is actually very key, because of that goal that Google has to reveal, results that are close to you. So that Google My Business directory is really key.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, if there's one thing you take away from this podcast, is if you didn't know you have one, that's step one. But if maybe you had one, a Google My Business directory, and you thought, oh, it's done, I got my address up there.
Yep.
They have made massive changes in the last 18 months. It's almost like a full web experience.
Yes.
There's information about, if it's women owned, or there's information about a special or an offer, a coupon that you might want to put on there. You can fill out photos of your team. You can actually pin them to be like the latitude and longitude, so that connects with the map. You can do all kinds of stuff, including putting really great keywords in your description. So there has been a massive expansion of what's available in that Google My Business, and it's totally free. So Google's giving it to you for free so that they can get good information on you. So that would be my number one, just, takeaway advice. Like, hey, if you're listening and you haven't heard that Google expanded this and it's free, that would be kind of the number one place to look there. So if you have that Google My Business profile built out, good keywords, relevant, then you have a chance at showing up when someone is doing that, air conditioning repair search in Tucson, and then it's providing that answer that Google wants to give.
Yeah, makes sense.
But if you don't have it, it's not there, and you don't have photos, think about what an opportunity that is to be lost for the trust tipping point, right? Now your consumer is trying to find, oh, what's a good resource? Doesn't see all the pictures, doesn't see the reviews, doesn't see the description, doesn't see that coupon or offer. And you've lost that ability to check that box for them as they're looking for evidence. So yeah, that's definitely one of the keys.
That makes sense. I mean, and that's something that, we at Anchor Wave, we actually give this away for free. And I'll probably put this in the podcast description in the transcripts. So all of you guys that are listening, you can download this free guide, It's, I believe, 8 steps on how to get your Google My Business listing done. Like we
Right.
literally walk you through on how to do it. And so anyone that wants to, get that guide, like I'll put the down in the description, and explains a little bit more about what Lily is talking about. But to expand on that, like, even Google wants the best trustworthy companies for their customers.
Right.
And their customers are searchers, are you and I, that are searching for services, for products, and they only want to put the best things in front of their customers. Otherwise, they're going to go somewhere else.
Right. Yeah. So I think you hit it right on the head. There's basically that twofold thing that's happening. One, do you show up and you're actually providing the answer, for that trust journey that folks are on? And then number two, what's there? What is actually available in terms of evidence, and the story and you contrast and that pain point that's being solved, all those things that need to happen, what's there.
Mhm.
So I think that Google My Business is definitely one. I'm glad you remembered that we give that away for free, because that is a great resource, and a way that folks can do that on their own, or if they want help, they can certainly reach out. The second big thing that I think is kind of an obvious one, is just that the website experience is just so many of opportunities involved in creating trust in that
Yes.
space. And, again, to kind of harken back to when I was talking about my history, and the first thing people had was like a business card and a logo. There's a lot of companies out there, pretty much that's all they have on their website. They're a business card site. Maybe you threw in a paragraph or a bullet point list of services, and called it a day. And it's kind of this mini brochure, just like a basic business card site. And
Yeah.
it just is not going to cut it. You really have to pay attention to these 6 stimuli that help you make these decisions. You have to get people to the trust tipping point. Otherwise, they're not going to gain anything from visiting that spot. Yes, you might have a website, but no, it doesn't make me feel good about visiting. If you were to go to that strip mall or to that storefront downtown and it was just in shambles,
Be scared.
sure. Yeah, right. Sure, you do air conditioning repair. I'm really going to invite you into my home.
Yep.
You wouldn't go there. So we have to start paying attention to, not only are we present, but do we build trust with each of these experiences that's happening. So I think that for us is like the big focus for this year, is making sure that everything that we are doing and every time we talk to someone is just helping them understand the power of this trust tipping point and how to get there.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense. I love that, because that is something that, like, what we said at the beginning, like if we can be that guide and help them figure it out, and that's kind of what we're doing at Anchor Wave. We're trying to help our customers figure that out, and then vice versa. We want them to do the same thing for their clients.
Right.
The website it's critical. I mean, that's something where, we made a shift, very big shift,
Yeah.
for Anchor Wave. I mean, I'm not going to steal the thunder. I mean, I think it's something that you should dive into if you like, on the shift that we made.
You want to
To-
talk about us killing off websites right here and now? It's this murdering of technology right here on this podcast.
yeah, I mean, we can dive into that probably another time, but for
Yeah,
some
well, the
people that,
short story is that we've been creating websites, and not to say that we did just a business card online. We'd add quite a bit of other technology and prettiness to it, but this is just so important to us. And when we realized this trust tipping point was such a critical thing, and we looked at these 6 stimuli that we just talked about, and
Mhm.
we had to say, no more will we do the old way. We can't service any client using those old techniques. If other agencies are doing it, fine, but we realize that the only way that we're going to get results, and the only way that this is going to actually produce business and grow a company's bottom line, is that it has to be this vital, alive, engaging, trust building process that you walk people through when they come to your
Yes.
.com. And so that's why we had to, that's the announcement we made recently. We are not doing websites any longer. We're building marketing hubs.
Yep.
And everything that I kind of just talked about is included in that marketing hub, because the focus and the priority is that trust tipping point. It's entirely different than what we've been doing before. We're building them in an entirely different way. So we had to distance ourselves from even thinking in that old way. And I think it's really critical for people to turn that corner and understand, don't invest in anything unless this is part of your strategy to get people to that trust tipping point. You've got those elements at play. Otherwise, it's going into the gray, it's going into that neutral zone.
Yes. Yep.
You're not gonna stand out. You're not gonna get anyone any closer to buying. So um, that's how important it is, to make this shift of something that we've been doing for 18 years and say, can't do it anymore. We've got to service people in a better way now.
Yeah, and that's huge. I mean, it goes back to what you just said. You got to have an opinion, So I love that, and that's one of the things I love about working with this company is that we have an opinion, we believe in it, but we do it in a way that is professional and it's fun. Like we're enjoying what we're doing here.
Yeah,
So
well,
the last thing, what was
definitely
that?
fun whenever you see the results too. That's so
Exactly.
so huge, and very much the exciting part of seeing folks get better results out of it. It's awesome.
Yeah, totally. So the last thing is that you'd mentioned that you wanted to kind of, I guess, point some people into something, an opportunity to kind of see all this stuff, like what you talked about. And, we have this thing called a playbook. And I guess the best way to kind of explain this is kind of like your marketing roadmap, and
Yeah.
and so how do people in the home services company get this, and how does it work?
Right. Well, and I know we're kind of talking about this stuff. There's a whole, speaking of visual stimuli, there's a whole another part of our brain we could use and kind of showing um, the results and showing the data and showing, what kind of tools we have to give a better light on this. And that's really another part of this guide is that we want to show you what's really available to you.
Mhm.
There's these different pockets of people who are in various cycles of making a decision. And so what we've been investing in for 18 years is figuring out how do we get to those people, and then furthermore, how can you create trust with people at
Yep.
those various stages of their buying cycle and where they're at in that decision making process. So that's really what the playbook does. It's you sit down with a strategist. You don't just read a report and then have to interpret all this like data all yourself and get overwhelmed, because that's super confusing and doesn't help you feel any more certain about making decisions. What we
Yep.
do is look at your business, and we use our proprietary tools to pull things like, did you know that you had reviews on this site over here that are either great, or do you know that you had these reviews that aren't great, and then you can have the power to do something about it. We talked about the Google My Business. How many people are looking at that Google My Business listing of yours, or do you have one that's getting any attention at all? So
Yep.
then you again, how many people are searching for your keyword term. So it really tells you what kind of opportunity you have at each of these points along the customer journey. And it's a completely objective. I think that's one of my favorite testimonials that we've gotten out of this process is
Yes.
is that this gentleman was said, this is just really objective. It's helpful. Now I have a baseline about where my business is at. And regardless of whether you do something yourself, in-house, you hand it off to your, front desk person, or you partner up with us, it's completely free. We just feel really good about sharing that information, giving you this tool, this roadmap. And then as you feel like you want to take the next step forward, you'll feel really confident that that's the one that you're at right now. This is the type of folks that you're going to predictably get out of that process.
Yep.
And so it really is just a stable way for us to kind of show what's going on in an easy to understand method. So I definitely would encourage it. So our URL for that is anchorwave.com/playbook.
Okay.
So just type out our web address, or you can look for us. And then after the .com, you're just going to put a slash and then the word playbook.
Yep. All
And then
one
you can,
word, right?
yeah, just one word.
Okay.
And you can sign up. It's completely free. Like I said, you just give us your address and an hour of your time. You're going to get a custom report that you can download. You'll talk over it with a strategist. And like I said, there's no obligation, no strings. It's really just information that's powerful. And if you've gained anything about, this trust piece, you'll be able to see it in action for your company.
Yeah.
There's one report in there. I just want to mention this one because people geek out on this too. If you're interested in finding, we talked about, searching and seeing where you
Yeah.
show up on the Google map. And we mentioned like, hey, I'm on the east side. I'm going to get search results that are relevant to me. But what are other people seeing in other parts of town? where does your competition rank? So we have a tool that can show you not only, because if you've ever Googled yourself from your business, you're going to get
the first result.
Decent results because you're right there, you're at your business. But how are you faring if someone down the block Googles you? Or what does it look like a couple blocks down or across town? And the cool part is you can now see, oh, there's maybe different results that people are getting in different parts of the city. And then what is my competition doing? And then you really have that really kind of cool, insightful, and that's a really proprietary tool that folks get a lot of value out of. So that's inside the playbook. Plus there's at least 6 others. So I would just say, take advantage of it. It is totally free. You're not going to lose anything. You're going to walk away with a lot of really great insights about your business. So
that's awesome. Well, Lilly, this was a great interview. You gave way more than what I expected as far as knowledge. I mean, I know that you're going to give some great stuff, but you dove into a lot of great stuff, and I hope everyone on here really enjoyed everything. And so again, the website is anchorwave.com/playbook.
Correct.
And just take a look at that. I'm excited about it because when I first saw the playbook, I was like, this is genius. This is amazing. And I love it. So anything else you want to add, Lilly, before we chime off?
No, that's it. I had a great time talking to you, Javier, and we are just really excited to be able to bring this to the people, offer something that really gives them value right out of the box. And like I said, let's make 2021 like the best year ever. There's no reason it can't be. And I think that's what we're here to do. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Trust Tipping Point Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Javier Lozano Jr. A lot of home services companies come to us at Anchorwave needing help with their overall marketing strategy and their digital presence. So what we ended up doing is creating a custom marketing playbook to help businesses just like yours in the home services space have an improved digital marketing roadmap for 2021. One of the highlights during this home services custom playbook is the importance of having a marketing hub, which we call as a website killer. And I'll be honest here, today's websites are dead, outdated, and ineffective. After 17 years and 1,300 plus websites, we've discovered the best approach to increase customer activity and to win more business is by having a marketing hub. A marketing hub will help set your home services business apart from your competition and place you as a leader in your space. So to learn more about what a marketing hub is, schedule a free custom home services playbook by going to anchorwave.com/playbook. You're going to answer 7 simple questions and we'll give you free access to this playbook. Again, go to anchorwave.com/playbook to get free access to our home services digital marketing playbook.